Hello and welcome to the beautiful city of Wolverhampton, although here at Horsley Fields, just outside the city centre, is probably not its best angle. The city is home to Wolverhampton Wanderers Football Club and a fantastic university, although I might be a little bit biased there. The city was at the heart of the Industrial Revolution, which led to a fantastic network of canals being built in the area. And it's that network of canals that we're going to use today to make a 35-mile traffic-free loop heading out towards Bloxwich, Brownhills, Aldridge, West Brom, Wednesbury and then back to Wolverhampton. I'm starting today's ride at Horsley Fields because this is where the Birmingham Mainline Canal, which connects Wolverhampton to Birmingham, meets the Wyrley and Essington Canal, known affectionately by the locals as the Curly Wyrley. The first 21 miles of this loop is on this canal, which starts right here under the bridge. So it's time to make a start and get going on this ride. So once we've crossed over the canal on the bridge, we take a right and head under the rail line. This is the main railway line between Wolverhampton and Birmingham. And straight away I'm going to make a stop and have a look here on the right. As soon as the canal passes under the bridge, it heads through a very narrow section of canal, which is much narrower than the canal at either side. Now this is where the original stop block was between the Birmingham Canal, which was owned and operated by the company which became Birmingham Canal Navigations, and the Wyrley and Essington Canal, which was run by a separate company, and there was some animosity between the two companies, mainly coming from the Birmingham Canal, who insisted that this stop block be put between the two canals, and that the Wyrley and Essington Canal be held 6 inches higher than the Birmingham Canal. This meant that every time the lock was opened, the Birmingham Canal would gain a little bit of water. However, in practice, it was extremely difficult to keep the Wyrley and Essington Canal that little bit higher than the Birmingham Canal, and if it wasn't that 6 inches higher, the Birmingham Canal would not allow the lock gates to open, and so traffic between the two canals would cease and goods would have to be manually transferred from boat to boat across the lock. As we start to make our way down the towpath, you can see that it's a really good surface here. However, don't let this lure you into a false sense of security. There are a lot worse sections of towpath to come, and although you won't need a mountain bike for this ride, you will need something with slightly fatter tyres than a road bike. I'm on my gravel bike today with 45mm tyres, but you'd also be fine to do this on some sort of hybrid bike. The canal takes us under the Wolverhampton to Walsall Railway, before bringing us to the Heathtown Silver Arch. This archway was constructed at the site of an old railway bridge which has now been dismantled. This railway was another route into Walsall from the area, and the arch is quite dramatic. It's definitely something a little bit different to look at as we make our way through this old industrial area. The local geese definitely seem to be a big fan as well. Before we get to Bentley Bridge Retail Park, the towpath crosses over the canal, before we reach what was a canal junction here at the retail park. Here on the right, the old Bentley Canal passes under the bridge and into the retail park. The Bentley Canal opened in 1843 and it linked the Wyrley and Essington Canal to the Anson branch of the Walsall Canal. The canal served steel works and quarries along its route, but was closed in the early 1960s, with only this short stub next to the Nickelodeon pub remaining today. The towpath is very well surfaced as we pass by the Bentley Bridge Retail Park, but as we go under Wolverhampton Road, under Rookery Bridge, the towpath turns to gravel. Obviously this is not an issue because I'm on a gravel bike and this is its natural habitat, and it's actually quite a well surfaced gravel path. The canal winds its way between Wensfield and Shortheath, through what is now mostly residential areas. Although housing surrounds the canal here, it's actually quite a pretty green corridor. As you can see, vegetation surrounds the canal, and there are lily pads on the canal itself here. In 1792 an Act of Parliament was passed, authorising a canal to be built from Wolverhampton to the collieries at Wyrley Bank and Essington, with the purpose of the canal to bring coal into Walsall and Wolverhampton from these collieries at Essington and Wyrley. Work began quickly on the canal, and in just 2 years, under the supervision of Chief Engineer William Pitt, the first 6 miles of canal to Sneyd Junction were open. As we pass through Shortheath, we come to Hollybank Basin, or what is sometimes known as the Shorteath Branch Canal. This is just a short arm that comes off the canal that was used as a railway interchange. While it looks very green and pleasant today, that would not have been the scene back in the 1800s. Our route takes us into Bentley Hay Nature Reserve, where the towpath becomes a bit more narrow and a bit more natural, shall we say. We come to Bentley Wharf Bridge, which gives us an idea of what used to be here. This was a wharf, with the area around being heavily worked for clay and coal. And as we pass through this nature reserve, you start to hear the drone of the motorway in the distance as we approach the M6. We pass under the motorway here just north of Junction 10, and this section of motorway between Walsall and Stafford was completed in 1968. We head under the M6 and through Roughwood Country Park, along another bumpy section of towpath, and this brings us out to Sneyd Junction, which was, back in its day, a very important junction on the canal. Originally, when the canal opened, the main line of the canal headed north here, with two branches heading off towards Essington and Wyrley, which give this canal its name. As the canal was extended westwards, this branch here became the Wyrley and Essington branch, with the main line extending out to Brown Hills and beyond. This branch was closed in 1955, and only runs as far as you can see there now towards the drain. We're going to head under the bridge towards Birchills and Walsall and carry on our route. The towpath is much improved here. Again, we're on a wide gravel track. As we pass by some of the moored boats here, there's also another branch going off to the left. This was the Sneyd branch. Although calling it a branch of the canal might be a little bit generous, as it only really ever extended a few hundred metres off the canal here, and was more of a wharf than an actual branch canal. After the canal pretty much makes a U-turn at Sneyd Junction, we're now heading south towards Walsall. There was a small towpath closure in place here, but the diversion was well marked, and I was very quickly back on the towpath, and we continue our way winding through Bloxwich towards Walsall. There's a large construction project going on here alongside the canal, of what appears to be a rather large windowless castle, or possibly the UK branch for the Men in Black. After a quick Google, I found out this actually wasn't the case, and it's something far less exciting. This is actually going to be an energy from waste plant, essentially a rubbish incinerator used to create energy. Apparently the site is more commonly known as the Super Tip, and it's due to be completed by 2027. We're now coming to the end of the first section of canal that was authorised by Parliament in 1792. But before this section of canal was even finished and opened, a second Act of Parliament in 1794 authorised the extension of the Wyrley and Essington Canal all the way to Huddlesford Junction on the Coventry Canal, just outside Lichfield. The Act also authorised the building of a branch canal from Brown Hills down past Aldridge all the way to Hay Head. And that's the way we're going to be heading. But first we need to carry on down this well-surfaced towpath to Birchills Junction, where the Wyrley and Essington Canal meets the Walsall Canal. When this section of the Wyrley and Essington Canal was built in the late 1700s, this wasn't a junction at the time, as the Walsall Canal did not come this far. There were talks of linking the two canals in 1835, but nothing came of it until 1840, when finally this junction was made and the two canals were linked. Here on the right is where the Walsall Canal comes into the Wyrley and Essington. We'll be heading over the bridge and sort of left and heading north, continuing our journey up the Wyrley and Essington Canal. If you're worried about getting lost, don't worry, I've left the Garmin Connect and Komoot links to this route in the video description. If you want to thank me for those, you can also buy me a coffee via a link in the video description also. And if you're enjoying the video, please do give it a like and drop me a comment. Also, don't forget to subscribe. It's absolutely free and it massively helps me. From Birchills Junction, the canal heads eastbound, continuing along the well-surfaced towpath, and we head over the top of the Cannock to Walsall Railway, better known as the Chase Line, as it passes Cannock, it then heads through Cannock Chase over to Rushall Valley. From here, the canal gently twists and turns a few more times before it turns and heads north towards Little Bloxwich and Pelsall Common. It's these many twists and turns of the Wyrley and Essington Canal that has led to the locals nicknaming the canal the Curly Wyrley. And I made sure I brought one along with me for a snack to honour that nickname. When the canal was first built, it mostly ran through open countryside, but as the West Midlands has grown in population, a lot of residential areas have been built around the canal, and here north of Walsall and around Little Bloxwich is no exception, as we pass through mainly residential settings on our way to Pelsall Common. We head under Tees's Bridge, which takes Stony Lane over the canal in Little Bloxwich. We lose the good surface that we've had on this towpath for quite a while now, and we head on to what I'm going to call a less loved part of the towpath, as we continue north towards Pelsall Common and head out into a much more rural area. This is one of the more challenging sections of towpath on this ride. However, we are in the middle of summer and haven't seen much rain recently, so the towpath was nice and dry and I didn't struggle at all. However, I have been told that during the winter this can be very challenging and very muddy in places, so maybe this ride is best kept for the drier months. It's worth pushing on though, because the views along this section are really very pretty. One interesting thing about the Wyrley and Essington Canal is the type of bridges that were used to cross it. Most of the bridges over the canal have square abutments and a flat top, and this was done for very good reason. The canal was built in order to serve collieries and to bring coal down into the West Midlands, powering the Industrial Revolution. But although this coal traffic was the main source of income for the canal, it was also one of its biggest headaches because it caused subsidence. This caused the level of the canal and the surrounding land to drop significantly. However, by building bridges with flat tops, it meant that they didn't have to be rebuilt when this happened. They would simply jack up the bridge at either side and place more bricks underneath, thus higher the level of the bridge. A clever solution to a fairly significant problem on the canal. The vast majority of the canal was built as a contour canal, in that it followed the contours of the land, meaning that it didn't need locks, and generally it wouldn't need embankments or cuttings. However, it does mean that the canal had to twist with the lay of the land, and this is the reason that it is so curly and has so many twists and turns, and why it has the nickname the Curly Wyrley. Just before the canal makes another turn and heads east into Pelsall Common, we can have a look where the Lord's Hayes branch used to meet the canal here. If you didn't know it used to join here, you'd probably miss it, but the canal widens and there's a little bit of concrete on the opposite bank, and that's where the Lord's Hayes branch joined on. It was only a couple of miles long, and it was built during the second phase of construction of the canal. However, in 1954, along with the Wyrley Bank branch, it was abandoned, and today most of the line has been filled in. As the canal curves to the east, we head on to Pelsall Common. Today a lovely area of tranquil heathland, but it wasn't always like this. The bridge that we're about to pass under is called Pelsall Works Bridge, and that gives us a clue of what used to be here. Because here on the common was Pelsall Iron Works. This consisted of 2 blast furnaces, 40 pudding furnaces and 7 mills. It was a huge site producing a massive amount of iron, and was also surrounded by a number of coal mines as well, which supplied coal not just to these furnaces, but for the canal to take to further afield. This was a hive of industry. It was not always this tranquil setting that we see here today. In fact, ironically, a lot of the places along the canal today that feel quite rural are actually the places where industry flourished, and a lot of the places that used to be rural when the canal was built are now built up as residential areas. On Pelsall Common we also find one of the most important junctions on this canal. This is Pelsall Junction, the junction of the Wyrley and Essington Canal with the Cannock Extension Canal. Now this Cannock Extension Canal was built quite late in terms of canals. It wasn't completed until 1863, and by this time the Wyrley and Essington Canal had merged with the Birmingham Canal Navigations, the company that ran most of the canals in and around Birmingham. This merger, which happened in 1840, meant there was more finance available to build these extensions, and it also helped build more links with the Birmingham Canal Navigations that already existed, such as the link to the Walsall Canal and the Bentley Canal that we saw earlier in the ride. The Cannock extension was one of the most important branches built off the Wyrley and Essington, because it headed up to the rich coalfields around Cannock. Literally millions of tons of coal was extracted from those coal fields and brought down the canal to power the vast industries that existed in Birmingham and the Black Country. Birmingham was known as the workshop of the world, and this workshop needed vast amounts of coal to power it. So good was this network of canals at supplying coal to Birmingham and the Black Country that the last commercial traffic to head down the Cannock Extension Canal was in 1961. This efficiency in moving coal is one of the reasons that the Birmingham Canal network grew so large and that much of it is still intact today, with the saying being that Birmingham has more miles of canal than Venice. And the Fingerpost pub here right on the side of the canal would certainly be a lovely place to enjoy this part of the network. After crossing Pelsall Common, the towpath improves very much so. You can see there's a defined path here, and it only improves as we wind our way towards Brown Hills. We pass under the Beacon Way, which now forms part of Route 5 of the National Cycle Network. This is a disused rail line that runs from Pelsall to Norton Keynes. We also pass under the Maclean Way. This is another disused rail line which I talked about extensively in my last video when I rode from Birmingham to Cannock Chase. It's a disused rail line that used to run from Walsall to Lichfield. It's now been turned into a wonderful greenway that runs from Walsall to Brown Hills, with plans to extend it further to Lichfield. I'll leave a link in the video description to that video if you want to learn more about the Maclean Way. As we head into Brown Hills itself, the towpath continues to be very good. On our right hand side we have Clayhanger Common, which was actually previously a council tip, and it operated from the 1950s to the early 1980s. The site was eventually capped off with colliery spoil and landscaped to the common that we see there today. On the left hand side of us across the canal we have the centre of Brown Hills and what was Brown Hills Wharf. Here were two short arms that went off to a railway interchange. You can see one of them is used for mooring today and the other one has been shortened to just a ramp to let the local canoe club get onto the canal. Brown Hills was hit hard by the decline of the coal industry. During the height of the collieries here, a large proportion of the population were employed by coal mining. The last coal pit closed here in the 1950s, and since then the town has worked hard to rejuvenate and diversify its economy. And from what I can see, it hasn't done a bad job. It looks like a pretty pleasant place. On the edge of Brown Hills, we also come across another important junction on the Wyrley and Essington Canal. This is Cat's Hill Junction. From here, the main line of the canal headed off towards Lichfield, and also had a branch up to Chasewater, known as the Anglesey branch. And we also have the Doe End branch that headed off towards Rushall Junction, this way under the bridge, which is the way that we'll be carrying on today. The line that now branches off to the left is now known as the Anglesey branch and not the main line, as the main line to Lichfield and Huddersfield Junction is now closed, with just the spur heading up to Chasewater Reservoir remaining. It's a pretty important part of the canal because the reservoir at Chasewater supplies a good percentage of the water to the Birmingham Canal navigations, and without this branch it would be cut off from one of its most important water supplies. Again, I did look at the Anglesey Branch Canal and Chasewater Reservoir in my last video, so the link to that is in the description if you want to learn a little bit more. We're now going to carry on down the Doe End branch, which in my last video I called the Door End branch, but in fact it is pronounced Doe, as a lot of people said in the comments. The Doe End branch was part of the second phase of building of the Wyrley and Essington Canal, and it was completed in 1800. Although, like the rest of the canal, it was built to carry coal, and there were lots of coal pits around this area, it was also built to connect the network to the limestone quarries at Hay Head, with limestone being extremely important for many of the industrial processes that were going on in the Black Country and Birmingham. The canal winds its way for 5 miles down past Walsall Wood and Aldridge. As well as coal mining in these areas, there was also a lot of clay mining, and the clay and the coal fueled industries such as brick making and tile making, and a lot of these factories sprung up around the canal. So even though a lot of this section looks quite pleasant and rural today, again, back in the Industrial Revolution it wasn't. It was a hive of industry. On the southern edge of Walsall Wood, we go under Latham's Bridge, which takes Boatman's Lane over the canal. And here there's a fantastic mural on the side of the bridge that gives us an idea of what the scene was here back during the 1800s. As we head into Aldridge, you might notice that the canal is up on a fairly large embankment. And this contradicts what I said earlier. I said that this canal had been built as a contour canal, so it didn't need large embankments or cuttings. But yet we find ourselves on a large embankment. But there's good reason for this. This actually wasn't built as an embankment. The canal was at ground level, but because of the large amounts of mining in the area for coal and clay and limestone, subsidence has had a massive effect on the canal. As I said earlier, a lot of these bridges with the flat tops were built so they could be lifted up when subsidence happened. But the canal would also drop and would need to be lifted up, and they did this by building these large embankments to keep the canal at the existing level that it was when it was built. It was quite an expensive maintenance task because land would have to be acquired at either side of the canal in order to build the embankments up, and then the canal itself would also have to strangely be filled in a bit to make it less deep so it would use less water. On the southern end of Aldridge, we also lose the good quality towpath that we've had since Pelsall Common. It narrows to just a dirt track and we lose that gravel underlayer that we had before. However, I didn't have any problems riding down this, although again, like the other section that we rode down that wasn't maintained, I've been told that in winter it can get quite muddy. After leaving Aldridge, the canal passes over an aqueduct, which also carries a road, which goes over the Walsall to Sutton Coldfield Railway. I thought it was interesting that here we have an evolution of transport. We have the canal, we have the railway, we have the road, and then as I looked up, we also had air travel. The section of canal between Aldridge and the end of the Doe End line is quite rural and never had as much mining as the other parts of the canal, and the builders knew this, so you'll find more traditional arched bridges, unlike the flat top bridges that we saw earlier on the Wyrley and Essington Canal, as they knew there wouldn't be subsidence in this area, so they could build them in the traditional way without worry. You'll also find some great rural scenes with the canal and horses together. And as we turn around, although we can still see Walsall in the distance, it's still a very agricultural view. The Doe End branch comes to an end at Longwood Junction. Here we meet the Rushall Canal head-on, and there's also another branch canal of the Wyrley and Essington called the Hay Head branch, which is quite a short spur and headed out to the limestone quarries at Hay Head. This short section was abandoned in 1954 and is now a site of important nature conservation. Straight ahead of us here is the lock that joins with the Rushall Canal, and to the left on this short spur, which is now just a short navigable section suitable for mooring boats, is the Hay Head branch. And coming out of this mooring area, who did I see but Andy Tidy. He's another YouTuber that does videos on the history of the Birmingham Canal navigations, and I watch a lot of his videos out of interest and also for research for these videos. They're extremely interesting, and I'll leave a link to his channel in the video description. I did have a quick chat with Andy and thanked him for his videos. I also said that he should make some more, to which he agreed, but said at the moment his jam making business was taking up a lot of his time. He runs that from the Jam Butty, the small boat that he tows behind his main boat. We've now moved down to that lock where the Rushall Canal meets the Wyrley and Essington Canal. Well, the Doe End branch of the Wyrley and Essington Canal. And you will have noticed for the last 21 miles we haven't seen a lock. And that's because the Wyrley and Essington Canal was so well built and so well maintained, as we've seen with all the embankments at Aldridge, that it didn't need any locks. It followed the contours of the land perfectly. But now we're going to head down the Rushall Canal, and this does have locks, 9 to be precise, and this will take us down past the edge of Walsall itself and down to the Tame Valley Canal at Rushall Junction. So on the Rushall Canal we get to enjoy what is a bit of a novelty on this ride, and that is some downhill riding. Fortunately, the towpath on the Rushall Canal is generally well maintained and a good gravel surface, so as long as there's nobody about, you can enjoy those downhills to the full. The Rushall Canal is almost perfectly straight, and seems absolutely straight compared to the Curly Wyrley Canal that we've just left. It was built in 1847, not long after that merger between the Wyrley and Essington and the Birmingham Canal Navigations companies, and it was built to be another link between the two canal systems. And although by 1847 railways were starting to become the dominant transport system, it was still deemed important enough to build this link due to the efficiency of transporting coal and other goods around Birmingham and the Black Country. As we mentioned before, it was really an efficient system to get that coal from the Cannock coalfields down to the industrial powerhouse of the West Midlands. And this canal provided a shortcut from those coalfields at Cannock down to Birmingham. The canal is just under 3 miles long, and a large proportion of it is designated as National Cycle Network Route 5, so the surface is really well maintained and it's a great gravel track. Having cycled this in my last video, I really did look forward to this section as I knew the surface was good and it's quite a pretty section of canal with its many locks. After a short blast down this canal, we head under the M6 motorway and arrive at Rushall Junction, where the Tame Valley Canal meets the Rushall Canal. So this is the Tame Valley Canal, and we've just come from the left here, under the M6 down the Rushall Canal. At this junction we're going to be taking a right turn, which will take us west into the area of Wednesbury, where the Tame Valley Canal meets the Walsall Canal. And as I said earlier in the video, if you're worried about navigation, I'm going to leave the Garmin Connect and Komoot links to this route in the video description. If you want to say thank you for those, or thank you for the video, you can also buy me a coffee via the link in the video description. Also, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. It all helps and it's all much appreciated. The Tame Valley Canal was another canal to be built quite late on in terms of canals. It was 1844 when this one was opened. It was built to bypass Birmingham city centre and the farmers' bridge locks that head up into the city centre along the Birmingham and Paisley Canal. Much like the Rushall Canal, which was built just after this, it's very straight, and it uses large embankments and cuttings to make its way across the landscape to its destination. Have you ever joined the M5 southbound from the M6 and wondered what that first bridge is that crosses over the motorway? Well yes, I have wondered that too. I mean, who hasn't? And it's the aqueduct that carries the Tame Valley Canal across the M5. And I tell you what, I'm definitely glad I'm on the canal today, because those congestion signs are flashing on the M6 as usual, the variable speed limit is in force, and the motorway system around the West Midlands is congested as ever. From up here we also get a good view of Birmingham city centre and the skyscrapers that lie in the distance. After crossing over the railway that links Wolverhampton to Aston, the towpath loses its solid surface and we're again back on a mud surface. It's a little bit bumpy in parts, but again perfectly passable, and I had no trouble on my gravel bike. This section of the ride along the Tame Valley Canal is just 3 miles long, as it takes us from Rushall Junction to Tame Valley Junction, two very unimaginative junction names. Before we make it to Tame Valley Junction, we head under the under construction Wednesbury to Brierley Hill Midlands Metro expansion. Here you can see they're utilising an old rail line by using the old bridge abutments with a modern surface to take the line over the canal. We also pass by an extremely large substation, which looks electrifyingly interesting. Substations are a key part of the electrical grid. They act as a crucial link between electricity generation and consumption, increasing voltage for efficient long-distance transmission or bringing voltage down for safe distribution into homes. Just before arriving at Tame Valley Junction, we head under the Black Country New Route, which heads all the way from Bilston down to West Brom. And then we come to the junction itself, where the Tame Valley Canal meets the Walsall Canal. So we've just come from the left, which is the Tame Valley Canal, and here at this junction we're going to be taking a right and heading north up the Walsall Canal. In order to do that we need to cross over this bridge, the classic black and white Birmingham Canal Navigations Bridge, which takes us to the towpath on the western side of the canal. towpath on the Walsall Canal is much better than that last bit of the Tame Valley Canal. We only spend a mile on this canal today, but the full mile has a solid surface. The Walsall Canal was built in quite a few sections. It was first started in 1783, but the section that we're on, that runs from Broadwaters to Darlaston, opened around 1800, with the final section, being the link to the Wyrley and Essington Canal that we passed earlier in the ride, not being opened until 1841. Partway up the Walsall Canal we need to switch sides as the towpath swaps from the west side to the east side. I didn't realise that and ploughed straight on, but hopefully my clever editing has hidden the fact that that happened. When we get to this bridge, which as far as I can tell has no name but carries a pipe over the canal, we need to head up onto it and take a left to follow the old Bradley branch line, which as you can see has some water in it still, but is no longer a navigable section of canal. We have to share the bridge space with a pipe, so it's quite tight, but when we get to the other side, although the canal is no longer navigable, the towpath most definitely is, and it's quite a nice cycle through the woods here. Eventually we come to an old lock flight, and although these locks are obviously not functional anymore, they're still quite obviously a set of locks, and there is still water flowing through them. I'm told that although this canal is disused, it's not been completely demolished because it still acts as a drain for the area. After heading up these couple of locks, we come to a road that we actually have to cross. And it's quite strange because we've actually been on the canal system now for almost 29 miles without having to cross a road. So it seems strange to pop up out of the canal ecosystem and mix again with modern infrastructure. Although we're quickly back on the old canal towpath and heading up the Bradley line. Although it looks much less like a canal here. You probably wouldn't know it was a canal unless you were told. But there are clues if you know what you're looking for, as we head up what is another set of locks up to the area known as Weddell Wynd. There's quite obvious flat sections and then rises where the locks are, and as far as I know the locks are complete but buried under the ground here. The purpose of the Bradley Branch Canal was to link the Walsall Canal to the Gospel Oak Loop line, or what's now known as the Wednesbury Oak Loop. This was part of the old Birmingham mainline canal, originally built by James Brindley back in the 1700s. This loop was bypassed by the new canal that was engineered by Thomas Telford and completed in 1827, and is now known as the Birmingham New Mainline Canal. The loops and sections of the old main line were left in place, as many wharves and industries had grown up along the banks of the canal. At the top of the hill, or the locks, we take a right turn and head in quite a straight direction towards the Gospel Oak Loop line, or as I said, what is now known as the Wednesbury Oak Loop. This brings us down to another road which I'm afraid we do actually have to cross. So that's 2 road crossings in this ride. I promise there aren't any more, but I don't think crossing 2 roads in a 35-mile ride around the second most built up area in the country is bad going. And after crossing the road, the path brings us down to a canal again. This is one half of the Wednesbury Oak Loop. The section was abandoned in 1954, but this northern part of the loop was never built over or demolished, because at the end of this loop is not only a canal and river trust workshop, but also a pumping station, which pumps water from the flooded mines below to keep the Birmingham Canal navigations topped up with water. So they never close this section, even though it doesn't really go anywhere and is not really in use by boats. The towpath along the side of this canal is really good, and it's a hard surface for the full 2 miles that we're on this loop. Those disused locks on the Bradley line also brought us back up to what is known as the Wolverhampton level. That's the level that we started off when we left the Birmingham mainline canal and headed on down the Wyrley and Essington Canal. So from here on out there's no more locks and no more elevation changes. The route brings us out at Coop Basin, where we meet the new Birmingham mainline canal, just north of the Coseley Tunnel. The Coseley Tunnel was built by Thomas Telford to bypass the Gospel Oak Loop and knock a significant amount of mileage off the trip between Birmingham and Wolverhampton. So the Gospel Oak Loop comes under that bridge there, or the Wednesbury Oak Loop, whatever you want to call it, and comes onto the Birmingham New Mainline Canal here. So we've come from the left side and we're going to take a right here and head north back towards Wolverhampton and our start point. And we now have just over 3 miles of flat riding to go back to our start point at Horsley Fields. This section of towpath forms part of Route 81 of the National Cycle Network. So again, it's a really good surface and will take us all the way to Wolverhampton without any mud or bumps. During the Industrial Revolution, Wolverhampton became a major centre for steel production, and a lot of that coal from the Cannock coalfields came down the Wyrley and Essington Canal straight to Wolverhampton. Although the heavy industry has now declined in the area, there's still a lot of manufacturing and engineering that goes on in and around Wolverhampton. And we're now arriving back at Horsley Fields, 35 miles later after setting off this morning down the Wyrley and Essington Canal. We've arrived back at the same place, heading up the Birmingham New Main Line Canal. And we haven't ridden a single mile on the road today. I really enjoyed this ride and looking at the history of the canals in the area. I hope you have too, and if you have, be sure to give the video a like. And if you've really enjoyed the video, you can buy me a coffee via the link in the video description. Also make sure you subscribe, it really does help keep the channel afloat. If you want to try this ride for yourself, don't forget that the Garmin Connect and Komoot links to this route are in the video description as well. Thank you very much for watching and happy cycling.